I'm honored for two reasons, and maybe she'll tell you herself, but mostly because I'm always intrigued with the whole marketing process, and I'm someone who's done it as well as her. And I just want her to come on the podcast and share some of that knowledge with us. Without further ado, Felicia, you have the floor. If you can tell us a little bit of your background.
Sure, and thank you so much for having me. A fun fact, we actually used to work together at Amplify a few years ago, which I'll talk a little bit more about Amplify, but so good to see you and be here. Thank you so much again. Like she said, my name's Felicia Morales. I'm currently the Director of Marketing at Amplify. I was actually born and raised in Corpus Christi. That's where I received my undergrad and master's degree, and where I got my start in marketing. I actually started as an intern for a music venue in Corpus called the House of Rock in 2009 and have just been doing marketing ever since. I moved to Austin in 2014 and found a home at Amplify in 2017. So I started with Amplify as a digital marketing strategist, kind of doing a little bit of everything: website, paid, social, and just made my way up to director of marketing here. So yeah.
So, how did you know that you wanted to do what you're doing currently? And I thank you for giving us that background of where you started. That's really exciting. Like, how did you know, like, well, this is what I want to do?
It's funny because it's actually not what I originally wanted to do. I was actually going to school for business management, and it wasn't until I had an internship at House of Rock, which was based around marketing, and that's when I knew I was really interested in it. Being 24 and being a new mom, I really wasn't ready to go down that management path, which is what I was going to school for. But luckily, because I was in business school, I didn't have to move too many things around to, refocus my major into marketing. So I actually double majored in marketing and management. But I really do have to emphasize here a little bit on how important an internship can really be in helping you determine like what your career path looks like, right? It gives you an opportunity to really confirm that you do or you don't want to go down this path before potentially ruining a relationship with a future employer or being stuck somewhere where you're like, man, this is really not what I wanted to do. So I'm forever grateful of having that internship when I first got my feet wet, because it really paved the way for where I'm at today.
I'm going to do a little side note. So, you've mentioned that we worked at Amplify,
Yeah.
and there was one of my mentor. So I always encourage having a mentor. She's always 20 years or 10 years older than you are. And she said, you know what? Your joy and happiness will change. And I want you to know when that changes, move. Don't stay because it's right and it feels right. And so in 2019, I definitely knew, you know what? I want to work with youths and mentor and do more of like like giving people voices to kind of share their ideas of what has worked for them. So I'm so glad you mentioned that, because everyone assumes you go to college, what you go in is what you're like, this is it, we've made it. So thank you so much for sharing that. Do you have any obstacles that you face currently or that you faced while trying to like get on this path, or anything else you want to add along those lines of what I said?
Yeah, no, I think it's great what you said because you're right. Like you want to feel good about where you're at, right? So if that moment comes that where you feel stuck or just unhappy for so long, you can always make a change. And so always go with what your gut feeling tells you because it's usually always right. But to kind of go back to your questions about obstacles, I actually have two. And one's more of an obstacle, one's another kind of like a little pet peeve that I feel like a lot of marketers get. But we'll start with the obstacle. So in my field, I feel like it can be a challenge to get people to recognize that marketing should not just happen in like isolated bursts, right? Like here and there. It's actually pretty vital for long-term success and requires consistent effort if you want to sustain positive outcomes. So in my opinion, like success really relies on consistent interactions with prospects or your audience over multiple channels, testing different promotions, tactics, channels, messages, just really to help in understanding what resonates most effectively with your target market. So for me, consistency remains like the key for sustained results. A lot of people believe that you can just do one campaign and it's going to like trigger the profits for an entire year, and it really doesn't work out that way. You have to kind of stay in front of your audience, not just one time but consistently. I always like to refer back to companies like McDonald's or Coca-Cola. These are some of the most well-known companies in their industry, if not the number one in their industry. And have you ever not seen a commercial or advertisement with them? Like, I constantly see commercials, billboards, even digital ads. Like, they really do it all, but I've never not seen them, right? So even them that hold a large portion of their market share, they still advertise because they know the moment that their audience starts seeing less of them and more of their competitors, they're probably going to move to their competitor, right? And kind of be swayed by that advertisement. So yeah, I always like to use that as an example of why you need consistent marketing and not just a one-time promotion. But you always just want to be in front of people.
I appreciate that. Do you have any? So I'm going to say this. It sounds funny because I don't watch the show. I've never been a fan, like not in a bad way, just time. But every time people are like, "Oh, the Kardashians are annoying. They're everywhere." Me as a businessman major, I'm like, they finally understood that if I'm in front of people's faces every single second, whether they love me or hate me, that's all they're gonna think about. So I just
Yep.
love that you mentioned it. So whenever I hear people say, "Oh, they just get on my nerves," or "They're everywhere," or "I love them," and I'm just like, somewhere in that family, they figured out the key to marketing, and they're like, that's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna like copiously force you to see us. So thank you so much for bringing that up.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. Just because their family has grown to the makeup line with Kylie, and then even getting into tequila. But because you hear that Kardashian name, you automatically already think of the other outlets for that name, right? And the other family members, not just like Kim or Chloe, but like everyone. So you're right. It's all about staying top of mind, and they have really figured it out. The second one, like I said, it was mostly a pet peeve versus an obstacle, but it can be an obstacle too. I feel like when people hear that I do marketing, their first immediate reaction is, "Oh, you do social media?" And I'm like, yes, and right, like there's so much more to marketing, um, and so many different aspects other than just social. I feel like social is like a big piece of it because it's always out there and people are constantly on it. But you have to think of emails, content, podcasts even kind of fall under the marketing umbrella, right? Websites, paid advertisement, billboards, commercials, video, graphic design, strategy. I mean, there's just so many pieces of marketing that you can get involved in, and it doesn't have to be just social. There's so many different avenues you can go into.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. It's just, it feels like I hear you. I'm like, oh, I'm very familiar with this woman. So I'm just like doing so great for the company. I don't even have to like say that on the podcast. I know. Um, so, so if someone listens to this particular podcast and they're like, hey, you know what? This is sounding kind of like what I envision. What advice would you give that person? And, like if they're like, I do want to do everything, but you and I know nothing is overnight.
hmm
They kind of hesitated on their formal decision. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, for me, like the best experience I got was just diving right in. You can take all the courses, you can read all the books, but nothing really equates to just getting into the platform that you want to learn, whether it's social, website, podcasting, right? You can read and listen to everyone, but until you start doing it, like you don't understand like the ins and outs of it, right? As much just by learning. So I always see in I follow a lot of Facebook groups and forums with marketing, and a lot of them are digital and social. And people are like, "How do I get started? I've done this course and this class." It's like, just dive right in, whether it's testing on your own company brand or doing something like an internship pro bono initially just to get your feet wet, because you're going to learn a whole lot more than what you can read in a book or even from sitting with someone and talking to them.
I like that. Um, I follow you on LinkedIn, and this is where I know you wear a lot of hats. And so I say that to say, people look at you, you're so presented and you're so like put together in work and on this conversation. How do you balance that for yourself? Like, how do you manage your work? How do you manage the life? And how do you blend, or like, have you found a way to kind of blend it all together so that work doesn't seem like work and you're able to separate family time from marketing?
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. And to tell everyone, it's not always what it seems online, right? Everyone looks so put together, but everyone's always, they have their challenges outside of what you see on social or in the front end. And as a mom, blending these together definitely doesn't really work for me. So I've had to learn to be a little bit more intentional on what I commit myself to. Asking myself, does this event or task that's being asked of me, does it align with my current role at Amplify? Does it align with my values? Because it's so easy to get double booked and, pop from one event to another event. And it's exhausting at the end of the day. And at the end of the week, you've gone to 3 to 5 events, and you're exhausted to where you don't want to do anything on the weekend, and the weekends are for my family time. And so, I have to be very more intentional, and that's something I learned just recently over this last year, really being more mindful and intentional on what I say yes to. Outside of my role with Amplify, I'm very involved with the Austin community. I'm the board president for Financial Health Pathways this year. Their focus is improving, financial health of underserved communities in Texas. I also serve on the board and marketing committees of the Austin Young Chamber, as well as an ambassador for the Greater Austin Hispanic Chamber, and part of their 23 Hispanic Austin leadership class. So it does sometimes feel like I'm stretched thin, but just being more intentional and doing self checkups at the end of the week, seeing like, hey, how do I feel? Am I tired? Do I need a day off? And sometimes it's just canceling or saying, hey, you know what, I really want to be there, but I can't make it. Um, and then also keeping a pretty tight calendar, right? To keep it all together and organized, and being just saying no sometimes is what helps so much to kind of keep them separate. So I have my family time and then my work and community time.
Let me say this and let me know if it resonates with what you just stated. I believe she's the director of those shows like oh, it blows my mind now, like Bridgerton. Is it Chandra Rhimes? I believe it's her name. If,
Okay, yeah.
yeah, if I'm
Didn't
incorrect.
she do
Yeah.
Grey's Anatomy?
Yeah, so
Okay,
it's
yeah.
yeah, so there was this article she wrote, and she said whenever someone says, "Wow, you did so great in this," or "You're so excellent in this," I love what she said. She said, "Remember, if I'm extraordinary in one area, you have to understand I am the void in another area. I'm not
Yep,
doing so great. So if
yep,
I'm here accepting this award for my brilliance in my art, I'm missing picking up my children for after school.
yep,
Someone else has to do that. And I just think that if we put that into perspective, it forced me to not be so perfect in failing, right? So
yeah,
sometimes when I'm like, okay, I did really great in this organizational set, that means something is the void and I will get to it. I just have to be mindful that I can't catch it all like Pokemon. Like, and that has helped me a whole lot. So I don't know if that
that's so
resonates,
funny.
but I wanted to share that.
No, you're absolutely right. And, having that support system too. So my fiance is a stay-at-home dad, so he does all the pickups and drop-offs and really kind of steps in when I can't, which allows me to be able to do all the things that I'm doing. If I didn't have that support, I probably couldn't, because you're right. If I was, a single parent, I probably would want to spend more time because I don't want to fail in that aspect because, my child, I'm the only person that they know and are their support. So it's really finding that balance and finding what you can handle. Because, like you said, yeah, you can't catch them all, and sometimes you have to say no, or it's just not the right time. Maybe next year, or maybe next month, or next week, and really prioritize your time because that time to yourself too is so important these days. It's so easy to forget that, and put yourself last.
Yeah. So that leads me to this question, like, what are some of the lessons that you've learned in your field or just the whole person that you've become?
So for relating to marketing, like in my field, again, I know we talked about it before, but consistency is key. I really can't stress that enough to be successful in marketing. Like, you have to kind of be out there. Even influencers, talk to them, and they have ups and downs with their posts. Sometimes it does really well and sometimes it doesn't, but it takes a few posts to go viral for them to actually become an influencer. But they're posting every day, multiple times a day. They get that consistency is key. And so I can't stress that enough. Um, and kind of in my personal life, something that I've learned is always just be your authentic self. I feel like we're kind of changing, the new generations and our generations are changing the stigma of, you have to be professional in your work life. You can't talk about personal issues or things that have happened to you because you might get the wrong idea of someone, or they might look at you differently. But I feel like those lived experiences also remind us that we're human. And if you were to tell me something that happened, I'd feel better probably about myself. Like, okay, something similar happened to me and I get it. And, it's just kind of bringing that human element back into the workspace that I think is so important because we forget that a lot.
Oh, I like that. Thank you for sharing that part.
Yeah.
Like humanizing management is the area that
Yeah.
I've been found. I like it. I like it. Well, what hope, I guess it's a hard, I hate this question, but I also love it. What hope do you have for future endeavors? Because I don't want us to rush and forget that presently we're doing amazing things. And so I tread lightly when I ask this question.
No, yeah, it's a great question, and it actually kind of made me sit and think for a while. So what I really hope in the future is to really have a positive impact in my community and for future Latina generations. Growing up in a low income household, I've seen firsthand the struggles of underserved communities can face. And I think you've talked in your podcast too about growing up with nothing and very little. And so if we can be, insightful or inspiring to others that, hey, we can change that. Like, just because that's how we grew up, or we had those challenges, that doesn't define us. Um, we can actually make a change and do something, and get involved with organizations that also aim to change the dialogue for these communities. So I really just want to support those efforts. And as a first college graduate, I love sharing my experience and journeys with others, so I can hope to inspire them that they too can, like I said, overcome these challenges that, you know, they were put in front of with, and it's nothing they can control. That's how they grew up, and as a child or a young adult, you really can't, change the way that happens, and you just kind of have to push forward.
I like that. And you serve a lot with your community. You also are very you're forefront with how Amplify is doing their marketing. Why I see it, and I think the this management brain of mine is like, oh, this is gonna work really well. And so sometimes it's not critical. It's more of like, oh, I can see something. I'm like, oh, this is gonna succeed. Like when they were doing the zero fee balance, I'm like, this is what's needed. I don't know why this wasn't done years ago by other banks, you know? And so it's like, go amplify. This is changing a lot of what is needed. But I want to say, like, how do you, like, with all the things that you've learned, what all the ways that you've changed my perception of marketing and also my perception of being someone in a company, but also serving your community really well. How can you tell people how can they better serve their communities and be impactful without
Yeah.
like they've lost themselves and said, okay, well, I don't want to do it because I don't want to blend too, but you've done it really well, in my opinion.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, I definitely want to go back to the fee free because there's a lot of information that we uncovered that I think is super helpful for, anyone kind of getting in or starting their financial journey. But for me, to help like really be impactful in the community is just get involved, find out what you're passionate about or your why as they call it. For me, my why was homelessness, affordability, mental illness, kind of all these things that underserved communities face. And when Amplify launched the fee-free banking, financial equity also came into play, equality and equity in the financial space. um, you know, and finding organizations that support that, you can get involved in. A lot of these nonprofits are already short staffed as it is, so any experience that you can offer or just help will be a huge advantage to them in achieving their goals for the community. So for me, when I was ready to get involved in the community, it took me a while to really figure out, okay, I'm ready. I finished my master's and it was 2 years I'd been with Amplify. I'm like, okay, I'm ready for that next thing. And what is it? It's community. And actually started researching organizations and would go to the events by myself, which was a little nerve wracking, but everyone is so friendly and so nice at these organizations, that I found a lot of homes, as you can see, with the organizations I'm involved in. But it's really just getting out there, getting involved, talking about these issues, that can really have a huge impact. And kind of going back to that financial equity piece, you brought up a good point with Amplify eliminating all fees. We actually got rid of over 40 plus fees on our checking accounts, personal and business accounts, um, where I believe it's like the first credit union in the nation to do something like that. And you're right, banks should have been doing this a long time ago. And in our research, we found that um, Black and brown communities actually pay 3 times more in fees than a white person would. And that was just so disheartening, seeing that, because these underserved communities don't have the resources that other communities have to really get out of this hole that they're in. And it's not that they dug themselves in their hole, but it's that they were passed down from generation to generation, right? Because these things aren't talked about, the education's not there, it's not in the schools. So how can we kind of change that dialogue for them, and amplify? I was so happy when they did that, because with my work with financial health pathways, that's something that really blends together in that effort. So finding organizations too that support what you're doing at work or what you're passionate about is so helpful.
Oh my goodness, that was such a beautiful statement. And shout out to the CEO. He was great. I did not have any issues, but I feel like that move to have someone represent what's going on and say, hey, look, I get it. You want to charge so much because it makes sense. This happened. But if someone isn't equipped with the knowledge to understand this is what's going to happen when you run this check this way, what they're
Yeah.
doing is continuing that like cycle of mistakes and patterns and not knowing how to get out of it. So it's like, if they don't know, they don't know. So, but to have someone sit there and have that conversation and want to listen, that makes a huge
Yeah.
difference. And hopefully we'll get more education around it, like any financial education for communities that are unaware of what that.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no. And you're right. Like, I was actually recently charged a bank fee with a credit union, a pretty big credit union here in Central Texas. Um, and that $25 fee turned into a $50 fee because not only did I get charged the fee from the bank, but a payment was short because it came from the wrong account. And so that fee turned into $50. But could you imagine if you have 3 or 4 of those in a month? That's hundreds of dollars every month that, you're trying to get out of this hole, but you you're not familiar with the process and how to do it, and the banks won't give you any kind of slack or forgiveness. And when I called and asked, like, hey, I made a mistake, I pulled it from the wrong account, I have multiple accounts with you, the money's in there, you know what they told me? I was so upset. They're like, well, it wouldn't be fair to everyone else we charge fees for if we forgave yours. And I was like, you're right. Like, it's not fair to be charged these fees. I have money, it just pulled from the wrong account, and that was my mistake, and I'm owning it, but asking to help because that $25 turned into $50 that I no longer had anymore.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I thank you for sharing that. Like, this has been so heartwarming to hear that. So I lead with this question because I believe in mentors. I believe people impact us. Who do you most admire and why?
Yeah, since I've started getting involved in the community and really getting more connected with my Latina roots, I've found some pretty impressive women who just inspire me every day, like Lourdes Zuniga, who is with Financial Health Pathways, the CEO of Financial Health Pathways, Mindy Hoffman, who is founder of the Women of Austin podcast, and Dr. Joanna Fabregas, who is the director at Con Mi Madre, all making a positive impact in our community with their work, whether it's creating a safe space for women to connect and collaborate, or bringing equity to minorities and these underserved communities. They're out there doing it. And I feel like they're really setting us up, the future Latina generations and women generations, for success by the work they're doing.
Nice. Nice. And so for you, how do you define success? I have a different idea for success, and it's not monetary. I'm just not a fan. So I always like to ask my people who come here and grace the podcast with me what they think the definition of success is in their opinion.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And I'm with you. I don't think success just means meeting your goals or the items you possess or like the size of your paycheck. I think it goes like beyond that, and really being happy and feeling good with where you're at. I know in this world of social media, it makes us think otherwise. And we become really hard on ourselves because we don't have all the things that they have that make it look, oh, like such a great life, or I need this to be happy. But by stepping back and taking a little bit more simplistic approach in defining success is, do I feel good with where I'm at? And that could be a variety of things. Do I feel good with my health, my family, finances, career, community, relationships, all these things, depending on what the priority is at that moment. Um, do I feel good in that place? And am I in a good place? And to me, if the answer is yes, or even moderately yes, then I've reached success for that moment. And on to the next one, right?
Yeah, I love that answer. I will continue to champion you through LinkedIn. Um,
Same. I
shout
love
out,
what you're doing.
thank you. And shout out to Stacy if she's still in the company. I
Woo.
try to
Oh,
keep
she is.
tell her if she doesn't remember, she was the first person that looked at me with an idea I said to her, and she took me to lunch. This was
Ooh.
in 2019.
Yeah.
and she discussed her vision for Amplify. She discussed ways that she was going to like kill it. And I just never forgot that. So shout out to her for all the great things that she did
Yeah.
and continue to. I don't forget anything. I just know at that moment, I'm like, okay, my path needs me to be more impactful. But before that, I had to travel around the world and do the Europe trip, just to
That's
enjoy
what's
life.
up. Good
Yeah.
for you.
So that's what I did. And then I got to work. I got to work after July 2019 when I came back. I'm like, I know what I want to do now. So yeah, thank her for that. Thank you for
Yeah.
everything you do. And no, we'll continue to have conversations and more impactful, um, I guess, meetings like this. And any way that I can assist, I'll definitely tell my audience, like, please continue to do your credit union justice, specifically Amplify, and, take all the financial education you can so you can succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And yes, Stacey's still with us, and she's great. She's really the one pushing this fee-free banking. Her and Kendall, the CEO, and they're fantastic to work with. I love working there. But I will definitely send her that message.